¡Ay, mira! ¡Ay, sí! Mira, aquí se ve, mira, ve. Ay, en los sueños también se ven. Ay, míralo, míralo, ve. Míralo ahí. Bendito seas tú, Señor Dios Padre Todopoderoso. Misericordioso y ay, qué hermoso, Dios mío, alabanza, gloria a tu Señor. Mira cómo se ve bonito el Señor de la misericordia ahí. Lo ve. Bendito seas tú, mi Señor. Gloria a ti, Señor. Estará grabando, no sé qué sabe. Él no está grabando. Él estará grabando.
$250 following a giant landslide that sent mud and debris crashing onto homes in southwest Colombia. Hundreds more men, women and children are injured and missing, with a state of emergency declared in the region around the small city of Mocoa, where hours of torrential rain caused rivers to overflow, triggering what's being called an avalanche of muddy water. The military has been deployed in a giant rescue operation, and Colombia's president has travelled to the disaster zone. Admitting authorities don't know how many people are under the mud, he said, "We continue to search. The first thing I'd like to say is that my heart, our hearts and the hearts of all Colombians are with the victims of this tragedy."
Todos los colombianos están con las víctimas de esta tragedia.
Landslides are not uncommon in Colombia, but the scale of this disaster is daunting. And as efforts to find survivors continue, the fear and the warning is that the death toll is likely to rise further.
The landslide struck in the middle of the night after hours of heavy rainfall, which caused the rivers there to burst their banks, flooding homes with mud. We know that more than 100 people have been killed so far. An unknown number are missing. Reports that an army officer there has said that the local hospital is struggling to cope with the scale of this situation, and a state of emergency has in fact been declared. Some reports, as I say, entire neighbourhoods being buried under this. Now, disaster response units are working hard to rescue anyone who might be trapped under the debris also that has been scattered, and also those who are left isolated in homes without electricity or water. There's also known that 2 bridges have been destroyed, making those rescue efforts even more difficult. In total, rescue services have said that there are actually 17 neighbourhoods that have been affected in all this, and it's worth noting that March has been the rainiest month for this country since 2011. It comes after neighbouring Peru has also been suffering a serious situation with the heavy rainfall and landslides there. We know that more than 90 people have died since the start of the year in Peru also. We know that the mayor of Colombia, actually his house has been affected. A lot of mud has been thrown on top of all of the roofs and entire homes. And as I say, the information we're getting coming into us more and more. So we are expecting actually the death toll could rise.
Early hours of this rescue operation, the biggest hurdle facing the search and rescue teams was trying to get access to Mocoa because many roads were simply washed away in the deluge of water or they were just blocked. So that prevented a lot of aid reaching the people who needed it most. What we've seen as the day has developed right now, as darkness fell in Mocoa, the search and rescue teams have been using thermal cameras which have been attached to drones, and they've been flying over some of the affected areas trying to locate the people who are still trapped under the rubble. And the civil defence says that the survivors of this deluge, this massive mudslide, are being temporarily housed in 3 shelters, temporary shelters that have been set up. And the Colombian Air Force are due to deliver more water, aid and medicine to many parts of Mocoa because a lot of the areas are still without power and still without water. 50 tanker trucks arrived earlier tonight, bringing with them potable water, which is badly needed by some residents.
Hurricane Matthew skirted Florida's east coast, packing 125-mile-per-hour wind gusts and sustained winds of 70 miles per hour. Miami and southern Florida escaped a direct hit, with only minor damage reported. As the storm approached Florida early this morning, it was located further north up the coast, just 45 miles east of Melbourne. The state's leaders made clear this powerful hurricane was a deadly danger.
Unfortunately, this is going to kill people.
Governor Rick Scott ordered an evacuation of 1.5 million Floridians living along the eastern coast. Tempers flared among some people as they tried to gas up before getting out.
I saw 2 guys fighting at a gas station yesterday. Yeah, actually throwing punches.
Those who stayed behind emptied store shelves, and Disney World closed for only the 4th time in its history. And thousands of travelers were stuck as flights were canceled at airports in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Orlando. Already more than 300,000 people were without power as the day began. CBN News anchor John Jessup is in Florida near Cocoa Beach.
As you can see, though, it's still a strong system packing heavy bands of rain and often strong wind gusts. Even though the storm's path has shifted, people are still being urged to stay indoors and off the roads. Countywide curfews went into effect late Thursday and last into Saturday morning, all designed to keep people indoors and off the roads.
Jessup reports the National Hurricane Center says storm surge and destruction will make places along the coast uninhabitable for weeks, possibly months. That's what the storm did as it devastated parts of southern Haiti, leaving thousands homeless and more than 300 people dead. For now, a major concern is that Matthew could turn westward, possibly striking Jacksonville, Florida, and major population areas of the southeast in Georgia and South Carolina.
Going down that Wally World. It's going down that Wally World, bro.
Shepard Smith went way overboard in warning Florida residents to evacuate in preparation for Hurricane Matthew.
See this? Melbourne, Daytona Beach, all the way up to Jacksonville. This moves 20 miles to the west, and you and everyone you know are dead. All of you. Because you can't survive it. It's not possible unless you're very, very lucky. And your kids die too.
Friday, the number of people killed by Hurricane Matthew in Haiti has risen to at least 478 people. The island nation's Central Civil Protection Agency, which takes longer to collate numbers, said 271 people died because of the storm, while over 61,500 remain in shelters. Officials said that food and water were urgently needed, noting that crops have been leveled, wells have been contaminated by seawater, and water treatment facilities have been destroyed. Matthew was the first Category 4 storm to hit Haiti since Hurricane Flora struck in 1963.
To South Korea, where Typhoon Chaba slammed across the country's south, leaving 7 people dead and another 3 missing. The violent storm caused severe flooding in the port of Busan, the country's second largest city, and the industrial city of Ulsan. Dozens of flights in and out of Jeju Island were canceled as Chaba brings gusts of up to 200 kilometers an hour. South Korean authorities say 2,500 schools had been closed, while tens of thousands of homes along the southern coast suffered power outages.
India says its forces have killed 3 suspected militants who were attempting to raid an army base in Kupwawa district in northern Kashmir. A police official said the 3 men were spotted near the de facto border between India and Pakistan. The incident is the latest in a series of attacks that has raised tensions between the two countries and left people living near the disputed region living in fear. Residents say some villagers have already fled their homes. Recent clashes began after 19 Indian soldiers were killed last month in an army base attack in Kashmir. Last week, India announced it had carried out strikes against militants camped on the Pakistani side of Kashmir. Islamabad has denied any involvement and vowed to retaliate against any aggression.
Now, the Russian Defense Ministry has cautioned the U.S. military against targeting Syrian government forces in the war-torn country.
I remind the U.S. colleagues that the air defense of the Russian military bases near Homeimim and Tartus is covered by a range of Russia's S-300 and S-400 air defense missile systems, which cover a radius that may be a surprise to any country operating its aircraft over the country. It must be understood that Russian air defense missile crews will unlikely have time to clarify via the hotline the exact flight program of the missiles or the ownership of their carriers, and dilettante illusions about stealth planes could collide with disappointing realities.
A Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konashenkov said any U.S. attacks on areas controlled by Syrian government could jeopardize the lives of Russian troops. Tensions have recently flared up between Moscow and Washington since the breakdown of a Syria's ceasefire deal brokered by the two countries.
15 years ago, the U.S. started its military campaign in Afghanistan, and few people foresaw the consequences. America's mission was to rid the country of both al-Qaeda and the Taliban, but more than a decade later, the security situation in Afghanistan is vastly worse than it was as the Taliban consistently strengthens its grip on the nation. Recently, world donors raised $15 billion to fund the country in exchange for political and economic reforms. And this is what Afghanistan is facing right now. An ongoing battle is raging in the northern city of Kunduz. The UN says the humanitarian situation there is rapidly deteriorating, forcing hundreds of people to leave the city. It is reported only one small hospital is proving medical care after another, run by Doctors Without Borders, was destroyed by an U.S. airstrike a year ago. Artis Ganich looks at America's military legacy in a country that the history calls the graveyard of empires.
How many times Americans heard the war in Afghanistan is almost over, almost won, and yet it drags on, more silently than before, but it continues, and Washington keeps changing plans.
The United States will maintain approximately 8,400 troops in Afghanistan into next year through the end of my administration. Together with our allies and the Afghan government, we have agreed that this is the year we will conclude our combat mission in Afghanistan. It is in our vital national interest to send an additional 30,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan.
I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war.
Having crippled al-Qaeda in Afghanistan a long time ago, the U.S. spent years and enormous resources fighting the Taliban. Despite these efforts, the Taliban today is resurgent. It is set to control roughly a third of Afghanistan. And guess what? Terrorists are finding a safe haven there again. ISIL has gained a foothold in Afghanistan. It runs a training camp there, even a school for children. All of which makes one ask, after all the lives sacrificed and resources spent, could Afghanistan be back to square one? One thing that did change dramatically in Afghanistan since the beginning of the war is opium production. It skyrocketed. 90% of heroin in the world now comes from Afghanistan. Roughly a year before the war, the Taliban banned opium cultivation, decided it was un-Islamic. And you see how over the years, it went up 40 times from 2001. The Taliban now actually use drug production as a source of income. The chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, recently described the fight against the Taliban as a stalemate. The insurgents made gains as the U.S. withdrew the bulk of its troops. Washington now calls for a reconciliation with the Taliban. The Taliban do not seem to reciprocate. In April, they admitted to an attempt on Secretary of State
asteroid belt in our solar system. When it did, it picked up a large amount of dust and debris, meteors, meteorites, and so forth, in its tail, in its debris field, as it began to stream through our solar system. Very soon it will pass by Mars. It will come to our sun, ricochet around the sun, and come toward the Earth. All along its path, it will be leaving debris. We don't know exactly where ISIN will come out ricocheting away from the sun. This is a supposed trajectory. So we don't know if ISIN is going to take a track that northerly. We don't know that. And I think it's possible that this model may be showing a more northerly orbit because they do not want panic to ensue on the Earth. Because with a more southerly orbit, this is what it looks like. This is Earth. This is December 17th. If it's more southerly, this is what's going to be happening. December 6th or 7th, we will enter into ISIN's debris field if this takes a more southerly orbit track, and we will not escape the debris field until the 9th of January. So I really truly believe that is why scientists are giving it a more northerly track. We don't honestly know. The truth is, no one knows where that track is going to be taken. We don't even know for sure if ISIN is going to escape the sun's gravitational pull. We don't know for sure whether it's just going to careen right into the sun. We don't know. But for now, this is the model that we're going by. Is Ison the first trumpet? Let's look at that. Just before the first trumpet takes place, Revelation 8:5, it says, "Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, and flashes of lightning, and an earthquake." So what we can expect, along with all of these fireballs coming at earth, just prior to the first trumpet, are peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. The American Meteor Society has been telling us that there has been a stark increase this year of fireball events and meteors passing through our atmosphere. From September 9th to September 12th alone, we had over 300 reports of major fireball events. Reports from California, Kansas, Missouri, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, West Virginia, Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, among others. Those are just in America. Those are just that 3-day period, over 300. And do you remember the fireball exploding over Alabama? And for states around Alabama, people could see this fireball. NASA's All-Sky Fireball Network detected nearly 24 other meteors on that same night, Monday night, September 9th, the night of Alabama's exploding fireball. We're told last year's high season for meteors, which is this month, was twice as high as normal. And this year's high season, this month, for meteors has exceeded last year's by 3 times that amount, making it 6 times the normal high season for meteors around the world this month. The latest worldwide meteorite news tells us that there are 33 close flyby asteroids that we know of for this month of September alone. Now, these are just the big ones that we know about, the ones that are big enough for us to see coming at us. 33 close flybys just this month alone that we now know of. Does that sound like a lot of fireballs coming out of a sensor toward the Earth? It sounds like it to me. So what do we look for then? What comes next with these fireballs? Peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. And remember, the most notable earthquake that we had was in Japan. To remember what kind of devastation that earthquake caused in an earthquake-prone zone, in a place where they were ready for earthquakes. Is it possible that Ison is not only the first trumpet fulfillment, but perhaps even the second and the third trumpet fulfillment? Let's look at that for a moment. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all of the green grass was burned up. Now, if someone tells you the first trumpet has been blown, they're incorrect. That trumpet has not been blown. And the way we know that is that a third of the earth has never been burned up. A third of all the trees on the earth have never been burned up at one time. And all of the green grass on the earth has never been burned up ever in the history of man. So to say that this trumpet has been fulfilled is not true. The second trumpet, the angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood, a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. If anyone tells you that this was Fukushima, they are wrong. If anyone tells you that this was the platform, the oil platform that blew up and burned and caused this terrible issue of oil in the Gulf of Mexico, this terrible catastrophe, no, they're wrong. Neither one of those incidents was the second trumpet, and the way we know that is that, number one, the sea, a third of the entire sea was never turned into blood. We do not know if a third of the sea creatures in the sea have died, because a lot of creatures are, but a lot of that has to do with sonar issues and hydroacoustic frequency blasts by the Navy. There has never been a time in history that a third of all the ships that exist on the earth today have been destroyed. That's the key. When there comes a time when hail and fire mixed with blood is hurled down on the earth and all this is burned up, that's going to be burned up in the first trumpet, if after that something like a huge mountain all ablaze is thrown into the sea, and all of this happens and a third of the ships are also destroyed in the sea, then we know that was the second trumpet. The third angel sounds his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers, on a third of the springs of water, and the name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that turned bitter. Now I did a word study on that verse. Let me share that with you. Revelation 8:10. The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star. In the Greek, the word is aster. Aster, from which we get the term asteroid. Just so that you know, we have a satellite that is an international program satellite named Aster. The satellite Aster stands for Advanced Spaceborne Thermal Emission and Reflection Radiometer. We have this satellite named Aster. It says whatever it is blazing like a torch, and it fell. Now the word fell also means failed, as in failing, it fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. That word third also means or for a third time. Now remember, this is the third trumpet. These things have been happening. The first one, a bunch of them come down. The second one, a big mountain all ablaze. Could be another one of these asters. This says it's the third time. So they could all be from the sky. They could all be asteroidal. And the name of the star is called, and that word called means it's figuratively spoken of as wormwood. So it doesn't mean that the star or this thing that is falling from the sky all ablaze is actually named wormwood. It means that people figuratively speak of it as though it were bitterness and calamity or wormwood. And a third of the waters turned bitter, that is the fresh waters, the rivers and the springs of water, the fresh water. And many people died from the waters that had become bitter. So whatever this is small enough that it can damage 1/3 of the fresh waters on the earth. Now, some people think Comet Ison is Nibiru. Comet Ison is not Nibiru. Nibiru is the name of the Sumerian demon star god who in occultic lore was worshipped as he guarded the passage of death in the cosmos. This Nibiru is another name for Satan, the demon star god who guards the passage of eternal death. This is another name for Satan. This is occultic. Wormwood is too small to be Nibiru. If Nibiru is the sun of a solar system that is coming through our solar system, which is absolutely preposterous. It is too big to be wormwood. So Christians, don't try to rationalize Nibiru and make it wormwood. It is not. Nibiru is an occultic religion. It's not small enough to poison 1/3 of the waters on Earth. If Nibiru careened into Earth, it would obliterate Earth and many of the other planets, if not all the other planets in our solar system. Nibiru is much too large to be one of the trumpets of Revelation 8. As a solar system, a star with a solar system, or a planet, if it careened into the earth as one of the trumpets, it would simply obliterate Earth. The first 3 trumpets are small enough to strike rivers, streams of water, our ocean, selectively burn trees and grass and 1/3 of the earth, not to demolish the entire planet. Peace-loving Christians find themselves rationalizing Nibiru with prophecy to avoid striving with friends who are radically attached to the concept of Nibiru, having been seduced into its fascination by the very star demon who originated its myth. That's right, Nibiru is a doctrine of demons, fathered and authored by Satan himself. Christians, you need to come out of its lure. So Ison is not Nibiru, and Nibiru is not wormwood, or any of the trumpets of Revelation. But could Ison be the fulfillment of not merely the fiery contents of the censer in heaven cast down on the earth just prior to the first trumpet? Could Ison's debris field and the asteroids and meteors Ison has already sent helter-skelter throughout the solar system because of going through the asteroid belt actually be the fulfillment of the first 3 trumpets? I believe if Ison does not bring their fulfillment, another comet's debris will. I believe just as the actual Greek designation of what is translated as the star is aster, that asteroids, especially from deadly, toxic, gaseous comets, or even some small comets, will likely be the fulfillment of the first 3 trumpets of Revelation. A hit from an actual comet, with its vile, poisonous gases and chemicals like arsenic and cyanide, cyanogen and diatonic carbon. These comets spewing gases and gas-spewing asteroids can even change the color of water by their toxicity or an ensuing massive plume of red algae, smothering the water's oxygen and killing all the fish. Such a space body falling to Earth could actually cause the ruin of ships with radioactivity, worse than that of Fukushima as well, if we can fathom it. ruining even a third of all the ships on the water. So great will be the contamination.
Erdogan will meet his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in St. Petersburg next month.
The main aim of these talks is to restore trade and economic ties between Russia and Turkey.
In recent years, Turkey's been good at making enemies, but that appears to be changing. Moscow, the latest neighbor to be invited to a return to cordial relations.
We will increase the number of friends we have and reduce the number of enemies. Our efforts in this regard will continue at a steady pace. And not only with Russia or Egypt, we also want to improve ties with all Black Sea and Mediterranean countries.
As soon as possible and at an accelerated pace. That's what Turkey says about normalizing relations with Russia. Turkey's Deputy Prime Minister Mehmet Şimşek made the announcement after meeting his Russian counterpart Arkady Dvorkovich in Moscow.
Some Burlington area residents say the Souris River is turning red. Good evening, I'm Katie Perkins.
And I'm Joe Skrzyszewski. Thanks for joining us. It sounds like something you'd find in the Bible, a river turning red, but as it turns out, there is an explanation for what's happening. State health officials say they believe they know what's making the river look this way, and they say Burlington area resident John Dawson got quite a surprise this past week.
As I've been working on fence up here, I've seen it up around the bend over there as well.
While working on his property near the Souris River, Dawson noticed a red tint on the water and the color started to grow. That's when he took some pictures and sent them to the North Dakota Department of Health.
It almost looks like it's oil floating on top of the water, not what you'd normally think of with algae. In addition, it's changed colors actually. It's been green, it's been red, it's mostly red.
In Brevard County, unfortunately, we have to report more dead fish have been spotted in the Banana River.
Daryl Nail got the tip late this afternoon. Daryl, what can you tell us about what's happening this time?
Ed, thanks for allowing us to come on your boat and show us what's going on. What did you see in terms of, can you quantify how many dead fish?
Yeah, Daryl, thanks for putting a spotlight on this. First of all, you know, this is something that's very important to me as the commissioner here. But as we turned here and made the right and went south, we started seeing little specks here and there, and then all of a sudden we thought were bubbles, and then it turned out to just be thousands and thousands of fish. And as you can see, it's just when I started the video, towards the end of it, I was just devastated. I really had no words for what I witnessed here.
And this is the same area. This was ground zero for the massive fish kill that was back in March. How does it make you feel to see this happening again?
Well, this is devastating. I'm in awe when we look at this stuff.
Begins with hundreds of dead fish washing up on the shores of Lake Thurmond. Early this morning, state agents launching an investigation to find out what caused that fish kill.
This is the worst I've seen. Larry Spivey has lived on the lake for more than 16 years, and this is the first time he's seen something like this happen just feet away from his back door.
But this weekend, something was different.
I come out to
test my boat. I've been working on it, and I noticed there was fish just floating everywhere.
And not just one or two, but hundreds of fish. McCormick says he's never seen anything like it.
I've never seen fish kill out here. I mean, it's got a pretty good flow through, and even in the years before when the lake was really low, you think that's when they would have it, you know, but it wasn't. It was, the lake's full right now.
Hundreds of dead fish wash up along the banks of the Aux Glades River. This is NBC 24 News at 6. Good evening. I'm Laura Emerson. Tonight's big story, the investigation into what is causing the fish kill in Putnam County.
Lots of people are creeped out by the idea of scientists making human-animal hybrids in the lab, but the government's ban on funding the research turned out to be short-lived. The National Institutes of Health plans to start funding hybrid research in early 2017, around a year and a half after saying scientists needed to slow down and consider the implications. So when it comes to mixing human and animal DNA, that genie is long out of the bottle. What the government has been stalling over is a step further, putting not just human DNA, but human stem cells into animals.
Well, what BGI can offer is something I could only dream about, and that is having whole genome sequencing done on these 2,000 extremely bright individuals. So by whole genome sequencing, I mean sequencing all 3 billion base pairs of DNA for each of these 2,000 individuals.
Oh, where intelligence is in the genes?
Well, people ask questions like, why do you want to do this sort of research? And I think in honesty, any scientist would say, because I'm interested in understanding it. I want to understand why some kids learn better than others, why some children have trouble in school, trouble learning. But in terms of society, and what good is it? Well, there's some bad that people worry about, like designer babies, parents might select babies based on genes. I would say, well, we ought to talk about it. Maybe it isn't totally a bad thing to do.
We have initiated to sequence 5,000 twins. We are going to sequence 1 million Chinese in order to know more about their genomes. I don't know how many years it would take, and then we expect that the gene will tell us the answers. I have a dream that we are going to sequence every living thing on earth. We are going to sequence everybody in the world. And the genomics, no doubt, is an opportunity for us all.
In theory, of course, you should be able to clone humans because humans are not different from other mammals in that respect. And our society is not ready to accept artificially cloned people.
Remember the first time I see these embryos under my microscope, and then after 4 months, and these embryos are becoming the pigs. And I'm just thinking, oh, these pigs, they used to be the embryos under my microscope, and I made these embryos. I was so excited about that.
Why?
Oh, it is really like being a mom. Yes, this is this is a life that I created. It is by my hand.
The best humans have not been produced yet. The smartest humans or the longest lived humans. The more we know about the coding, the more we can optimize and move toward the direction that we want to move in. If you want to produce smart humans or nice humans, honorable humans, caring humans, whatever it is, those are traits that are related to certain presence or absence of certain genes, and will have much finer control over the types of people that are born in the future through this. But it's an essentially mathematical description of there's a trait that you're interested in, you want to push it in one direction or the other. Which switches do you turn on and off in order to do that? We do it with cows. We have super cows and super chickens. We have animals that mature several times faster than the wild versions. So we've pushed those animals in directions we want to push them, but we haven't really pushed ourselves. And I think people will push themselves.